Okay. Uh, Wing-chun, kuen. Any system really, but it seems to be some traditional styles have a big problem with it. Possibly Tai Chi Chuan or Tai Chi Quan as well, which is over Puritanism or the attitude, Western misprojections. So the punch, the the punch might come from, like, instead of the centre line, it might come slightly off centre, which might not look as fanciful or technical, but it's more powerful. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is, during a sparring scenario or a sort of any resistance scenario, it won't look in its pure form. It won't look like that. So again, I don't think the problem is with systems and with styles. I think the problem is with attitude. And again, maybe this is a Western misprojection. I'm pretty confident that it could be that problem. So the arm might come out again sideways rather than centre, so it might come slightly out, only slightly. It might be like half centre or semi centre line, but it will, the structure will be a broken structure. It's not going to look in its pure form. Just like mathematics, applied maths and pure maths, it's different. Classroom, it's a different class subject. So yeah, the it can come semi centre line, so like trying to be centre, but it just goes a bit skew if, or it can be totally to the side or whatever. You can apply this to Western boxing though. The punch, in its pure form, when you say do a shadow boxing routine, which is roughly the Western equivalent of a kata or a taolu, a form, is a Western boxing routine is not going to look like a sparring scenario, because you can do your technique crisp and clean and it'll look technically perfect, and it won't when there's another person that's resisting. It gets chaotic and messy. So again, I think the problem is attitude and misprojections, not the system or the style itself. So yes, in WC, Wing Chun Kuen, it might the punch might come slightly offside or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I think it's more the principles. It's not so much the physical thing of getting it 100.000% correct. I think that's just OCD. I think that it's much better to the principles: mental toughness, mental strength, morale in the West, or as I call morale, Western Chi, or if you want Chi power in the Kung Fu or in the East. But yeah, it's more the mental, the attitude, how you carry yourself, the intimidation, mental toughness, things like that, resilience, and again, in the West they would call it sports psychology, in the East Chi. It doesn't really matter to me, but over puritanicalism will not work with any system, Western or Eastern. Again, as I say, if you look at, say, a lead jab in Western boxing, if you do it like a shadow punch, shadow boxing format of the jab, you can get it all technically perfect, the angle complete to all the decimal plate. You can get it completely technically correct, but it won't look like that when it's applied. Absolutely the same for Kung Fu and for Wing Chun, Kuen. So yeah, more I'd say not so much a problem with the martial arts system as a problem with the attitude, the mental attitude. I think there's an attitude problem. So in the TMA traditional and TCMA traditional Chinese art do is that they use barehanded and bare knuckle, also palm strikes, very good, and you can condition your fists so that you don't graze, because it's kind of girly to wear hand wraps and pads, so that you don't graze. It's like you're fighting anyway, so who cares? But And Kyokushinkai does this also barehanded, but yeah, it's conditioning. So actually, that's something that TMA and TCMA get more realistic than modern martial styles, is that the lack of hand wraps and gloves, the barehanded approach, is actually more realistic. Yeah, the uncovered than bounding your hand up in all these coverings and things. It's actually the traditional, again, in terms of like gloves and wraps, the traditional mentality of going without them is more realistic than wearing all these things. You know, it's more artificial. Also affects the combat distance, depending on how big the glove is. You know, from maybe a couple of inches all the way up to whatever, or a couple of millimeters up to a couple of inches. But depending on how much ounces they are, whether it's like 16 or 14 or 17 or whichever ounces, but it'll affect combat distance. Because without them you don't get that inch or 2 or 3 of reach, you know. So the combat distance is affected. That's going to affect the footwork and how long you step the footwork, and etc. and etc. and etc. Which is just walking, really. When people say technical footwork mostly with striking systems, it's just walking with maybe a bit of technique. But that's kind of what it is, because you won't get, again, if you try and think get your foot 45.0 degrees exactly 100%, you know, perfectly aligned, it's just not going to be like that. So again, attitude, not the system's problem, it's the attitude. But yeah, dependent if it's like large style gloves or even mid style gloves, the if it sticks out, you know, one inch or a couple of inches, it'll affect the combat distance, and it'll affect how you step or how you move with your feet to make up distance, or how you march towards the opponent, like Triple G or Golovkin or any one, you know, how you walk, because it's just walking with intent, really. Footwear in martial art, it's walking with purpose. And again, if you get too caught up in, because it has to happen automatically or you won't have time. So yeah, it's I would say walking with intent, not just in Western boxing. With Western fencing it's slightly different, because you've got the big lunge, but because you've got a blade, you can, to an extent, the karate kumite and the shotokan can have a similarity with Western fencing, with this big lunge step. But the danger with the lunge step, especially unarmed, is it's unrecoverable. You put yourself in such a position that you can't really, and even I'm sure people have talked about this in the Western fencing community, of that lunge is hard to recover. You're kind of stuck then in that. So if it works, great. If it doesn't, you kind of, you know, stumped. So yeah. So yeah, I think to sum up the idea, the problem is misprojections and not the martial system or martial arts system. It's more about concepts and principles than an actual physical move. And also the over technicality can apply to a Western system as much as a Kung Fu style. So yeah. Yeah, in summary, it doesn't matter, again, with the jig chun choi or with the single punch. It doesn't really matter if it's slightly coming off centre. It's jig chin choi being chain punch. Single punch, can't remember the name for. But yeah, if it comes slightly off of perfect, it doesn't really matter. It's about, again, the concepts, keeping to the basic structure. If you can just keep to the basic structure, rough shape, it's like drawing a rough shape. It's keep to the basic structure and you'll be okay. more concept based and principle based rather than based on a very physical exact technique to a very specific angle, decimal place, you know. Anyway, that's just about that style or styles and systems. And then CLF works as well, Choi Li Foot, because of the Sao Choi, and the swinging moves can work good in sparring. So Kai Li Fo or Kai Li Fo in Mandarin, I think. But yeah, amalgamation of 3 systems. I think Li Gar, Foot Gar and Chow Gar. And the subsystems, I think there's Hung Sing and Buk Sing, and then there's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 subsystems. And the most common, I think, is Buk Sing, CLF. But yeah, the swinging arms are very applicable, I would say, to sparring scenario. Newton's third law, prudishness. Is there any point talking about the maturity? Alright, when we're on the subject of martial arts, I'll stay on the same subject of martial arts. So, the ancient Greeks allegedly did it, and other cultures did it, but maturity, sheeple, or non-maturity of sheeple. Or immaturity is probably the problem, not this, but this. And would like to call myself the founder. So double N, independent, because it means if someone else in another universe or dimension invented it, it means I invented it independently, because I don't know that they did it, so I've come up with this independently, I've invented it independently. Is what's the word? Oh yeah, again, not a clothing issue, maturity issue, immaturity, sheeple. Yeah, attitude, just like the Wing-chun with the punch that goes slightly off center. It's the misprojection, and misattitude, wrong attitude is the problem. Mental attitude, not so much the physical thing of what it is, the attitude. So yeah, immaturity or non-maturity is a problem there, and too much prudishness. Again, the fake prudishness, I can't understand. Too much prudishness will lead to